This area right here is about a 50 square mile area, and within that area, there are specific areas they are targeting to try to locate evidence.
We don't have a body, we don't have anything.
This is Ella Goody, a 32-year-old mother of two from Scott, Louisiana, who was driving rideshare to take care of her kids when she picked up a passenger she had driven before and never made it back home. And the most disturbing part is not just what he did to her on that drive. It is that the man she picked up was supposed to be standing in a courtroom that same morning, answering for a crime where he had already shot someone and nearly killed them. But before we get into that, let's go back to where this all started from.
Everybody's just saying they don't be knowing nothing.
Stop sending unknown messages to family members because I feel like that's not right. We already going through enough as is. We don't need y'all bashing us.
Ella Kiana Goody was born on September 4th, 1989, and she grew up in Lafayette, Louisiana, in a situation that would have been too much for a lot of people to handle that young. Her mother was handicapped, so from a very early age, Ella was the one stepping up, taking care of her mom, and helping raise her younger brother at a time. Around the year 2000, when she was about 11 or 12 years old, she spent some time in a youth detention home for troubled teenagers, and that is actually where she met a girl named Felicia Broussard, who would go on to become her closest friend and what Ella called her big sister for the next 22 years. People who knew Ella consistently described her the same way, every single time without fail. Her laugh was the kind that took over the whole room, and you always knew when she had arrived somewhere because the energy in the place just changed. Her cousin Jessica Goody put it simply. By 2022, Ella was living in Scott, Louisiana, right next door to Lafayette, with two teenage kids counting on her every day, a son and a daughter named Armani. She had gotten into rideshare driving after Felicia talked her into signing up for Lyft as a way to bring in steady money. And even though she was not totally comfortable with strangers getting in her car at first, she eventually got relaxed enough to start accepting off-app rides too, meaning rides she would set up directly with people she already knew from past trips, all for a little extra cash. That detail matters a lot to this story because it is exactly how she ended up in the car with Brandon Francisco that morning. Ella was 5'3", about 120 to 168 pounds, with black hair, brown eyes, a gap in her front teeth, and heavy tattoos all over her body. The names Anthony and Tristan were tattooed on her neck and chest to honor people she loved, and she drove a black 2012 Audi Q5 for her rides. She also kept a 9mm handgun in the car for her own protection, because when you're a woman picking up strangers at all hours of the night, carrying a weapon for your safety is not paranoia, it's just being smart. Now let's get into the man who was sitting in her passenger seat on March 9th, because understanding his background is the only way you can fully appreciate how wrong everything about that day was. Brandon Jermaine Francisco was born around 1985 and grew up in Mansura, Louisiana, in Avoyelles Parish, a small, quiet town about an hour northwest of Baton Rouge. No one from his family ever said a single word to the press throughout this whole case. Not his parents, not siblings, nobody. Everything we know about Brandon Francisco comes from his court records, and those records paint a very clear picture of who this man was long before he ever set foot in Ella Goody's car. In 2007, he stabbed a woman named Tatiana Jacobs in Marksville, and court documents say it was done with the specific intent to kill her, with a documented history of domestic violence against her before that. He pleaded guilty to attempted second-degree murder and walked away with the aggravated burglary charge dropped on top of it. 1 year after that, in 2008, he pleaded guilty to carnal knowledge of a juvenile. Then, in 2017, while already in the system, he was convicted of sneaking a cell phone and marijuana into jail, which ended his probation right there. And then came Christmas Eve of 2018, which is where things got seriously out of hand. Francisco and a man named Travell Marquez Lewis pulled up on an unnamed man on the side of U.S. Highway 71 near Cheneyville in Rapides Parish. They shot him over what prosecutors later described as an unpaid drug debt, stole his vehicle, and drove off, leaving the man critically hurt in a roadside ditch. The victim survived, barely, but Francisco picked up charges of attempted first-degree murder, armed robbery, unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, obstruction of justice, and criminal conspiracy all in one go.
We begin with breaking news. The Rapides Parish Sheriff's Office has arrested 2 people in connection to the Christmas Eve south of Cheneyville that left a person in critical condition. 33-year-old Brandon Jermaine Francisco and 30-year-old Travell Marquez Lewis, both from Mensura, have been charged with a number of crimes, including attempted first-degree and armed robbery. Both suspects were taken into custody without incident and remain in jail at this time. Detectives say their investigation is still ongoing. Lewis's bond is set at more than $800,000. Francisco's bond has not been set as of now. Back on Christmas Eve, several law enforcement agencies responded to an area near the 11600 block of US 71 South. The victim had several gunshot wounds and was transported to a local hospital.
What came next is the part that genuinely makes no sense when you lay it all out. The courts gave him bond. He sat on that bond for years while the case kept getting pushed back, and by early 2022, he had already no-showed a scheduled jury trial on February 7th by claiming he had COVID-19 exposure, but when they tested him, he came back negative. The DA filed a motion calling that excuse a deliberate attempt to delay the trial. A new court date was set, and this time it wasn't a trial. It was a bond revocation hearing. This meant the judge was about to decide whether Francisco should be locked up while he waited for his case to move forward. That hearing was set on March 9, 2022, and Francisco chose not to go. Instead, the night before, he reached out to Ella Goody and asked her for a ride to Houston, Texas, knowing she had driven him before and would say yes. She agreed and told her kids she would be back the next day. So the same morning, a judge was sitting in a Rapides Parish courtroom waiting for Brandon Francisco to walk in. He was climbing into the passenger seat of Ella's black Audi Q5, while her children sat at home expecting their mother to come back. The morning of March 9th started out looking routine. Ella and Francisco met up in the Lafayette area, and according to federal court documents, they checked into a hotel together around 6:30 in the morning. They stayed for roughly 3 hours and then got back in the car, pulling out onto I-10 heading west towards Houston. At some point during the drive, Ella stopped in Lake Charles to see a friend. That friend would later sit down with investigators and tell them she had seen Ella's 9mm handgun in the car during that visit, and that there was a man in the passenger seat, which was Francisco. What nobody in that room knew at that moment was that Francisco had already taken note of where she kept it and had already made up his mind about what he planned to do before they reached Houston. After the Lake Charles stop, they got back on the highway and continued west along I-10 in the direction of Iowa, Louisiana, which is a small town in Calcasieu Parish, sitting between Lake Charles and the Texas state line. And that's where the trail goes cold in the worst possible way. Cell phone records show that both Ella's phone and Francisco's phone stopped sending any signal for exactly 51 minutes as they were driving towards Iowa, and everything that happened to Ella happened inside that 51-minute window when nobody could see or track either one of them. Near Iowa, Francisco took control of Ella's car by force, reached for the 9mm handgun that she kept there specifically for her own protection as a female driver working late-night rides, and used it to shoot her several times. After shooting her, he disposed of her body somewhere along or near that stretch of southwest Louisiana highway. Then he got behind the wheel of Ella's Audi and turned that car north, not towards Houston where he told her he was going, not back to Louisiana where his court date was waiting, but north, putting as many miles as he could between himself and what he had just done. That same night, Francisco checked himself into a hotel in Bedford, Texas, right outside Dallas, and slept. The next morning, he kept driving north.
Toward Missouri, where he had people he trusted who could put him up. He had Ella's car, her key fob, and the gun. Back in Scott, Louisiana, Ella's children were sitting at home waiting for their mother to come through the door. She had told them she would be back the next day, so when the next day came and went and her phone kept owing to voicemail, the fear started setting in fast. On March 11th, her family officially reported her missing after nobody had heard from her at all. Her brother Authorization Jr. started working every contact he had, calling people and reaching out to anyone who might know something, while Felicia was doing the same thing from her end, both of them posting on social media and speaking to news stations trying to get the word out.
If you're listening, know that your family is never, ever is going to give up on you. No. We're going to look for you until God say, tell us one way or the other, but we're here for you. So please, Ella, whatever you could do to get away, find a way, please.
An Acadiana family pleading for help in locating their loved one. Good evening, everyone. Tonight marks 1 week since Ella Goody was last seen, and police have now identified someone they want to talk to in the case. Goody, who's 32 years old, was last seen driving on I-10 West. Her family tells us she was giving someone a ride to Texas, but hasn't been heard from since. Megan Glover joins us live from outside Scott Police. And Megan, how's her family holding up?
Jim, the family is coping through prayer. We just heard Ella's aunt speaking, and they're pleading for a safe return. Ella Goody is a mother of 2 girls, 13 and 14 years old. Her family say she told her daughter she would be back by the end of school last Wednesday after driving someone to Houston.
I think she spoke to her daughter on that day, that morning, and said, make sure that she was going to school, and her mom was going to be back before she get back from school. That she was just going to go bring this person to Houston, and she was going to come back.
Goody had worked as a rideshare driver, but police say she was suspended from doing so at the time of her trip. But family members say she started offering driving services on her own.
This guy asked her to bring it to Houston. From her heart, she said, yeah, man, give me the money, pay me to bring it to Houston, I'm going to bring it to Houston.
The community in Lafayette started rallying around the family, holding vigils and spreading the word to anyone who would listen. What none of them knew at the time they filed that report was that Francisco had already crossed state lines multiple times and was now sitting in a friend's house in St. Joseph, Missouri, with Ella's car hidden out back. Louisiana State Police took over the investigation into Ella's disappearance and started building the timeline using cell phone tower records, witness statements, and traffic camera footage to trace where she had gone and who she had been with. Investigators pulled traffic camera footage that showed Ella's black Audi Q5 heading north out of Dallas on US Highway 75 on March 10th and again on March 11th, which told them immediately that whoever was driving that car was going the exact opposite direction from Houston, where Ella was supposed to have been headed. That was the first concrete sign that something had gone very wrong. Francisco had already been named a person of interest, and detectives were working to find him. On March 25, 2022, United States Marshals located Brandon Francisco in St. Joseph, Missouri, and arrested him on an outstanding Louisiana warrant tied to him skipping his March 9th court hearing. When they searched him at the time of the arrest, they found 2 things on him that directly connected him to Ella: her vehicle key fob and the 9mm handgun. Ella's case was still officially a missing persons investigation when they took him in, though that was about to change quickly. About 6 days after Francisco's arrest, St. Joseph Police Department found Ella's car hidden behind a private residence in the city, a place belonging to someone Francisco was connected to. The car had been deliberately hidden with the intent that nobody would find it. The original Louisiana license plates had been taken off, and a sunshade had been placed over the front windshield so nobody could see inside the vehicle from the street. When investigators got inside and looked at the interior, they found a large amount of blood covering the entire front passenger side floorboard and 2 bullet holes in the body of the car.
State police say the car belonging to missing Scott woman Ella Goody was found today. Goody herself is still missing. The discovery of her vehicle comes 3 weeks after her family first reported her missing on March 9th. News 10's Britt LaFaso, who has been investigating this story, from the very beginning, tells us where her vehicle was discovered and how police hope it could lead to crucial evidence in this case. Britt.
Goody's vehicle was found this morning in St. Joseph, Missouri, the same city that the person of interest in her disappearance was located and arrested just last week. As police continue to question that person of interest, they say the next step in this case is to find any physical evidence that may be in Goody's vehicle, ultimately leading them to find her.
So they're going to continue to look through that whole vehicle on a more deeper level, other than just like looking at it and confirm, yeah, that's it. Okay, what else can we see? Is there's, fibers in the carpet? Or is there something within the fabric on there? Maybe we can get a fingerprint off of the upholstery, off the window or anything like that. So we're going to continue to go through that whole vehicle, inside and out.
Louisiana State Trooper Derek Senegal says they hope any physical evidence they find in Goody's vehicle could help them piece together what happened in the time between March 9th, when Goody allegedly left Lafayette with Brandon Francisco, and now. The main question, how did Francisco and Goody's vehicle both end up in Missouri without her? And where is she now?
All these things have to be put together and continue digging to figure out, what's going on, how can we piece everything together. If there's someone else, if there is, or could be, or, maybe there is someone else involved with this thing. So we just have to make sure that we continue to look and not just say, hey, we're good, we found it, and just close the case. We just can't do it that way. So we're going to continue looking and exhaust every effort that we have for this.
Trooper Senegal says there's still a lot of focus on Brandon Francisco, the person believed to have last been seen with Goody. With Francisco in custody and Goody's vehicle found, police say they hope they can narrow down where Goody may be.
A vehicle is just an object, just a thing, but we'd rather find a person wherever she's at. Of course, like I said, we find a vehicle that's good on the investigation part, and now we just have to continue with that. Like I say, sometimes those the evidence or clues lead to other things. Like I say, maybe it could just lead to her and figure out where she is.
The family is full right now with emotion, trying to understand these new developments and what they mean or what they could mean. The family is still hopeful that Ella is still alive. But right now, they are worried that all of these interactions, specifically with these being reported to the FBI, reported to the Scott Police, is kind of getting in the way of the investigation that's taking place.
And as we've mentioned, Brandon Francisco is believed to be the last person to see Ella Goody before she went missing on March 9th. Reports show in 2008, Francisco was convicted of statutory and attempted second-degree. Later in 2018, he was charged with attempted conspiracy to commit armed robbery, unlawful use of a movable, and obstruction of justice. He was set to appear in court for these charges the day Ella Goody went missing, though he failed to show up. Francisco will have his second bond hearing Monday in Missouri. At this time, he is fighting extradition back to Louisiana.
Shortly after the car was found, Louisiana State Police officially changed Ella Goody's case from a missing persons investigation to a homicide investigation, which confirmed what the blood and bullet holes in that Audi had already made clear. Francisco waived his right to fight extradition and was brought back to Louisiana, booked into the Rapides Parish Jail in Alexandria on April 6, 2022, and held without any bond this time. Prosecutors now had him in custody and were working two separate cases against him at the same time: the old Cheneyville shooting from 2018 and the new Ella Goody homicide investigation. The first case to move was the old one. On October 4, 2022, Francisco stood before Judge Greg Beard in Rapides Parish District Court and pleaded guilty to attempted second-degree murder for the Christmas Eve 2018 shooting in Cheneyville. The remaining charges were dropped as part of the agreement, and he was sentenced to 30 years at Louisiana State Penitentiary, which is Angola, with no chance of probation, parole, or any kind of early release. Rapides Parish District Attorney Philip Terrell said at the time that Francisco was a very dangerous criminal and called it a very good resolution for the people of Rapides Parish, noting that the sentence would keep him locked up past the year 2050.
This is a very good resolution for the people of Rapides Parish. Mr. Francisco is a very dangerous criminal, and we're excited to be able to send him to Angola for 30 years. That puts him away until past 2050. So we're excited that that this dangerous criminal will be off the streets and in the penitentiary where he belongs.
For Ella's family, that 30-year sentence meant nothing on its own, because that case had nothing to do with Ella. Her killer still had not been formally charged for what he did to her, and her body still had not been found. The federal side of things moved at its own pace, and it took more time. In November of 2024, a federal grand jury in Lafayette finally handed down an indictment charging Francisco with carjacking resulting in death, along with related firearms charges and a charge of fleeing to avoid being prosecuted. Prosecutors had spent the time building a case so airtight that Francisco would have very little room to fight it in court. And they were right. On November 13, 2025, Brandon Francisco walked into the United States District Court for the Western District of Louisiana and pled guilty to carjacking resulting in death. He admitted in open court to every single detail of what happened on March 9th, and he also admitted to something that told you everything you needed to know about his character. After the shooting, he tried to blame a made-up, unknown man for killing Ella, pointing investigators towards a person who did not exist, hoping the lie would hold long enough to get him off. It did not. Under the plea agreement, prosecutors agreed not to seek the death penalty, and Francisco accepted a mandatory federal life sentence, so there would be no trial.
Tonight, we finally know what happened to missing Lafayette woman Ella Goody. This after suspect Brandon Francisco pled guilty to federal charges. Francisco has also agreed to spend the rest of his life in prison. In return, the government has agreed not to seek the death penalty. I combed through the federal documents recounting Ella's last movements and moments alive with Francisco.
We don't have a body. We don't have anything.
After 3 years and 9 months, Ella's family have some answers. Brandon Francisco detailing to federal agents what happened on March 9th, 2022. That morning, he was supposed to appear in court in Rapides Parish for an attempted charge. He feared his bond would be revoked and he'd be put back in jail. So he fled. The plan, get to St. Joseph, Missouri, where he had friends. Francisco says he'd known Ella Goody, a former Uber and Lyft driver, because she drove him before. Francisco asked Goody to drive him there, but she said no because she had to be back home with her 2 children. They agreed on Houston, Texas. Francisco met Goody in Lafayette in her black Audi in the very early morning. Francisco and Goody check into a Houston hotel around 6:28 a.m. They check out a few hours later at 9:30 a.m. The two then head back towards Louisiana. Goody stops in Lake Charles to meet a friend. Goody's vehicle later flagged by Scott police in their investigation.
We know it's her vehicle. Due to the tinted windows, it's undetermined if she was driving or if anyone was with her at that time on March the 9th.
We know now that Goody was with Francisco. After the stop in Lake Charles, Goody and Francisco take off again on I-10. Near Iowa, Goody and Francisco's cell phone activity stops for 51 minutes. It's this area that investigators later search.
This area right here is about a 50 square mile area, and within that area, there are specific areas they are targeting to try to locate evidence.
Francisco now telling federal investigators he took Goody's vehicle through force. He took the firearm she kept in her vehicle for protection, her several times, disposed of her body, and fled in her car. After Ella, Francisco spent the night in Bedford, Texas. The next morning, he arrives at a friend's home in Missouri. 15 days later, he's arrested. Francisco has Goody's firearm and key fob. He also admits to giving a false statement, blaming another man for Ella Goody. 6 days later, Goody's vehicle is found in Missouri, hidden at a home. The front passenger floorboard covered in blood. 2 bullet holes pierced the vehicle.
I mean, a vehicle is just an object, just a thing, but we'd rather find a person wherever she's at.
3 months after Goody disappeared, investigators say this.
They are transitioning this actual missing person case to a homicide investigation.
Francisco initially pled not guilty to the federal charge against him of committing a carjacking resulting in death. But just recently, on October 29, 2025, Francisco changed that plea to guilty. He agreed to spend the rest of his life in prison. The federal court documents, however, make no mention of Goody's body. Goody's cousin, Jessica.
Every day we lived with this, and we continue to till we can get Lala back where we want her.
The U.S. Attorney General and a federal judge must now accept Francisco's plea. His sentencing is set for January 27th, 2026. It's important to note Francisco was facing charges in Rapides Parish before Ella Goody's death for attempted murder. Francisco will no longer face those state charges or spend the rest of his days in Angola. He'll be remanded to a federal prison if his plea is accepted.
Sentencing was scheduled on January 27, 2026 in the federal courthouse in Lake Charles. When that day arrived, 14 members of Ella's family came and filled that courtroom, and about half of them stood up and spoke, including Ella's son, her daughter Armani, and her father Authorization Goody. Francisco sat there through all of it without any expression on his face, listening to Ella's children describe what it's been like growing up without their mother, and then the moment the marshals walked him out of that courtroom. The man sat stone-faced through everything Ella's children had to say and then smiled on his way out. Ella's brother, who has been the public voice for this family since the very beginning, spoke about what it was like to be in that room and have to look Francisco in the face. Ella's father, Authorization, spoke directly to Francisco and told him what he had taken from him and from those grandchildren. Ella's son told Francisco he would never forgive him, and Ella's daughter called him pure evil and asked how he could have done what he did, knowing that she and her brother were at home waiting for their mother.
The man who killed Ella Goody will spend the rest of his life in prison. This after a federal judge accepted his plea agreement just hours ago.
News 10's Britt LaFossa was the only reporter in the courtroom. She joins us live at the federal courthouse in Lake Charles. That's where Brandon Francisco appeared in court this afternoon. Britt.
Yeah, guys, Ella Goody's family, of course, is happy that Brandon Francisco will be spending the rest of his life in a federal prison. But today, of course, was also really hard on Ella's family. 14 family members showed up. About half of them gave witness impact testimonies, and that included Ella's 2 kids, her teenage daughter and her teenage son, and her father. Brandon Francisco sat back in his chair, seemingly no emotion as he listened to them pour their hearts out. But whenever marshals escorted him out of the courtroom, he smiled.
Justice for Ella. We're happy that this young man got life.
While Ella Goody's mother could not be in court in person, Ella's father addressed Brandon Francisco in the courtroom. Authorization Goody Sr. telling Francisco how much he took from him, his firstborn child.
Bury my daughter. I could have a peace of mind.
Yes.
Her and I don't have a peace of mind.
Yes. Ella's brother told Francisco he ruined his life and said he hopes Francisco sees Ella every time he closes his eyes.
We got justice for her some type of way. We're just waiting to find her body so we could put her to rest the right way. She got a son and a daughter, and she did not know Brandon in no type of way. She just was giving them a ride.
That's right.
It's too bad they got evil people in the world.
Make it a living for
we
her
here,
family.
and we're going to forever speak her name.
Make it a living for her
Ella!
family.
Ella's son told Francisco he will never forgive him. Ella's daughter called Francisco pure evil. She questioned him on how he killed their mother, knowing she and her brother existed and were waiting for their mom back home. After court, Ella's daughter had a message for her community.
Everybody just be saying they don't be knowing nothing.
Stop sending unknown messages to family members because I feel like that's not right. We already going through enough as is. We don't need y'all bashing us or even just saying brutal things in the comments or anything.
It's not right. That's
Ella's family standing in solidarity, still keeping the hope they can find her remains and give Ella a proper burial.
Thanks on the behalf of all the agents, everybody who helped to find, to do the searches, with everything, just all the help they got from everybody. Thank y'all, and I'm truly blessed. At least we got some type of, a little bit of closure, a little bit,
And one thing you guys heard Ella Goody's family say is they still do not know where her remains are. No one does. But the state attorney did say in court today that that is a process that they are working on, and they feel pretty confident they will be able to find Ella Goody's body. Live in Lake Charles, Britt LaFaso, KLFY News 10.
Every person who stood up in that courtroom said a version of the same thing, that Francisco took something that cannot be replaced, and that they're going to carry that weight for the rest of their lives. The federal judge sentenced Brandon Francisco to life in federal prison, with that sentence set to begin only after he has finished serving the 30-year Angola sentence he is already in the middle of. That means Francisco will finish 30 years at Angola first, and then when he walks out of that facility, he will immediately begin serving a federal life sentence. Brandon Francisco is going to die in prison, and there is no version of events that changes. U.S. Attorney Zachary Keller called it a brutal and senseless crime and said the life sentence was the result of the work done together by Louisiana State Police, the FBI, and the U.S. Marshals Service. But for Ella's family, the conviction only gave them part of what they needed. As of sentencing day in January 2026, she had still not been found. Prosecutors stated in court that Francisco's admissions during the plea process gave them an approximate location, and that Louisiana State Police, alongside federal investigators, are still actively searching for her. The family has made it clear that the conviction, as important as it is, cannot fully close this chapter until Ella comes home. What do you think about this brutal case? Let me know in the comments section. Click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this. See you in the next one.